Okay, perfect. So I'm Erica Schuppe, and I'm one of the occupational therapists over at Blue Skies Pediatric Therapy. And I have been working with some trauma-informed things for about 15 years now. My experience with this type of therapy and looking at things began with trauma experiences abroad. And that's me as a baby OT traveled over to Russia. And I was able to go there while I was in grad school for a few weeks and spend time with kids in orphanages, as well as the year right after So my first experiences with kids with experienced trauma, I was saying, were two experiences that I had in Russia. And we learned a little bit in OT school just about the effects of deprivation on kids. But this was a way to see that in a very extreme manner and just to see what those kids look like. And I was really curious about why some of the kids appeared to be more resilient and some of the kids were literally dying from this deprivation type experience. I saw firsthand what that looked like when you had untreated cerebral palsy. What did it look like for some of these kids that just had spina bifida, or some of the kids that seemed to have really mild challenges? How come they were really doing poorly? So that's when my interest in this was first peaked. Came back to the States, and my husband and I began doing foster care. And we have a little quote up there about it's not always just sunshine and rainbows. It was amazing between the kids I was seeing in the clinic and my own daughter at home, just the big behaviors that we were seeing. These kids weren't experiencing nearly the same things as those kids in the orphanages, but just some of the behaviors, the repetitive behaviors, the stereotypical behaviors, the huge behaviors, the throwing things, the destruction of stuff. I began just seeing so many more patterns coming from all of these kids that had come from trauma, and I just wanted to dig into that a little bit more. I had that opportunity when my husband and I moved to a new home, and our little one that we were fostering completely came unglued. And I did all of the things that you're taught to do as a parent. We were doing just the behavioral supports. I took her into the pediatrician. None of those things were really working. The diagnoses they wanted to help give to my kid included like reactive attachment, things that don't offer a lot of hope for a parent. And I wasn't making a lot of headway with her. So that's when I had the opportunity to meet Stacy York, who is a counselor here in Billings, who our first meeting told me, stop thinking like a mom and start thinking like an OT. And she introduced me to the neurosequential model of therapeutics. And within just a few weeks, I know that it had changed our lives at home with my daughter. And it really changed the way I was seeing and working with all of these kids at the clinic. And I think you guys have all done a little bit of background with that, but it's just a different lens. It's a neurodevelopmental lens for looking at kids. And you can tell based on the timing and the type of neglect, abuse, chaos that they experienced, what kind of difficulties they were going to have. And it really, like I said, just changed how I looked at everything. And for the first time ever, it was something that
So I'm hoping you guys heard a little bit at least about the background of why this is such a high interest area for me. But getting the neurodevelopmental lens from Stacy York really changed everything about what I was doing. It worked at my home. It was things I could teach parents. And for once, I was seeing pretty quick results with these same kids at the clinic, which had really been a challenge for me in the past. I dove into this like it was my job because it meant so much to me and my family. So a little bit more just about the background of the NMT. I think you all have learned a little bit about this, but kind of what they're finding is that interuterine stress that they used to say wasn't really a big deal, even just the chaos of what families are going through, the abuse of the mother, the stress, the inconsistency of a place to live. That combined with maybe drug and alcohol use and the trauma immediately following the birth are really impacting kiddos' brainstem. And those are the kiddos that parents bring in, and a lot of times they're having a lot of difficulty sleeping is one thing that the parents will bring up. The kids that fall asleep and wake right back up, they're the kids that are 18 months or 3 and have never slept through the night. The diencephalon, and these are just kind of loose age areas. But, you know, through about that first 18 months of life, those are the big behavior kids that people end up sending our direction, or that I talk to parents and that's what they're having. Because these kids have the biggest sensory processing challenges. And so they're reacting to this a lot of times in a big fight or flight type way. And the kids that are coming out swinging are for sure getting everyone's attention. And these are also kids that don't regulate themselves well. They're just regulating off of where they're at. And having had a very dysregulated toddler and preschooler in my home because of these challenges, I know what that does to a family. It's really, really challenging to keep yourself regulated when you have no idea what's going on and you're not sure of a way to help your kid. So I typically just refer to these kids as the co-regulators. The next system up to be impacted by this trauma that's toddlerhood through the kindergarten-ish years, that 4 to 6, somewhere around there. Those kids have a continued self-regulation difficulties, differences with mood, differences with empathy, attachment, those kind of things that are coming through. And then the cortex for that trauma that lasts longer and that trauma that happens at those older ages, those kids have even holes just in their thinking processes. So I thought this was a great graph on how all of this applies to OT, and I'm hoping that you can see that okay on there. So there's all of those bottom pieces I like to think about as the really early stuff that goes on with kids. And the pieces of that OTs might look at include the suck, swallow, the gag, the attention and tracking, the eye movements, the autonomic regulation, and then you go up a little bit more and we're in fine motor skills, feeding and appetite, sleep, coordination, sensory processing, arousal, and you go up even further than that, and there's the relationships, the somatosensory regulation. All of those pieces are kind of, I think, pieces in a puzzle, and OTs can look at each one of those pieces and help put together that puzzle a little bit better. So that early trauma is disproportionately influences development. And if you look back at that graph, it's easy to figure out why. If you have holes down there at the bottom and you are not sleeping, and if you have holes down there at the bottom and you still are fumbling your way through preschool level motor skills, you look up at the top, well, there's no way those kids can perform in school. There's no way that they can continue on with the routines needed for school to be successful or at home either. They aren't rewarded the same way as other kids. They're not responding to the behavior charts that they're using in class, etc. A lot of those kids are stuck at that toddler type behavior, even though some of these kids are 9, 10.
Hey, Erica, I think we just lost you. I don't know if you hit mute on your phone. Oh, Erica?
Huge, huge, huge. We look at all of those pieces here today. And
a lot of times we have people, oh, am I still there?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. And a lot of times we'll have parents come in and talk about just how disorganized their kids are, or that they're constantly climbing to the top of things. And when we back up the boat a little bit, we can find all of these holes way down in the bottom, and we can start to put those puzzle pieces together so the children's performance can be better up there at the top. So combining the NMT with the OT training has been just a perfect fit for us here at the clinic. I've been able to put together some more trauma-specific type of sensory diets for families. And sometimes I feel like the parents, it just seems like it can't be that simple, some of the things that we send them home with. But I have parents coming back even after 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks, and they're seeing changes that they hadn't been seeing before. So it's just amazing to see how powerful that can be when you fill in some of those lower building blocks. Keeping the kids out of fight or flight through some of these OT strategies has been really powerful, because you can finally learn. You can sit down at the dinner table with your family. You can engage in a game with a friend. And it's a lot more easy to parent a child who is not in fight or flight. Like I said previously, give them the building blocks necessary to access those upper levels of the brain. And then a big piece of this is parent and caregiver education. I wanted to spend more time in the schools because they have these kids for such a long amount of time of the day compared to the rest of us. But that parent piece, getting parents on board with the idea of dedicating 10 minutes at the top of every hour to their kid, is going to make the rest of their day look better, make the rest of their school day look better, has been really powerful. And giving the parents a few simple tools too to look at their kids and see if they are dysregulated versus just being non-compliant. That's been a huge tool for parents, because the strategies that a parent can use and the patience that a parent can get and the co-regulation that can happen with that different understanding is a powerful tool for in the home. So I think that's kind of all I had put together for today. Wanted to make sure I stayed in the timeline, and I'm not good at that. I think what would be good to have for the medical community in Billings is more earlier referrals. I think would be good. We end up getting a lot of kids that have already been struggling for years additionally after concerns were first noted. And it's so much easier to make big changes and make changes quickly with kids when they're younger versus when we're waiting till kids are 7 and 8 and 9 and we've waited to see if things are going to get better. And then the counseling piece too, we have a lot of kids that come in that have been doing counseling for a while. But when the kids are disorganized down there at the bottom parts, they're not as ready to access those cognitive strategies. So they're not learning in school, and then their counseling is really not sticking either because they're such a mess at the lower levels of their brain. So once we get that system regulated a little bit better, the counseling piece seems to be so much more useful for these families.
Great. Thanks, Erica. So I wonder if we can take maybe at least sort of maybe 10 minutes and go over a little bit of Q&A. And I was wondering if maybe it wouldn't hurt to, can you put that graph up again, the Bruce Perry's chart there? Yeah. Because I think, right, that's pretty much central. That's central to what you were saying. And this presentation has been circulated to everyone via email. But really, right, what you're showing here, it's sort of a representation, starting at the bottom with the most primitive parts of our brain and then kind of going upwards to the more, let's say, the ones that have been developed sort of, let's say, most recently in evolution, right?
Right.
So question, what are some examples? You said there's some things that you can't believe how simple they are that have actually been effective. Can you give some examples? Just, for those of us, because for those of us who aren't OTs, I'll speak for myself. It still sounds very, there's some magic that you do, and what is that? So what are some examples of some of the things that you've, and understanding that every child is different, but what are some of the things that have worked for you that you've been surprised, or maybe not you've been surprised, but parents have been surprised, wow, this was simple and this really helped?
I think one of the easiest strategies that I encourage parents to do is to put a swing in their kids in the house somewhere. I don't care if it's in the garage, if it's in the basement, if it's out back. That if we think about how much of our caregiving, our early caregiving with kids is that rhythmic and repetitive movement. We are constantly holding, swaddling, shushing, putting kids in rockers and in things that help calm them down, putting them up to our chest and letting them feel our calm heart rates. So for the kids that have not done that, and they've had this chaotic spot, they were born in a state of chaos and then stayed there for 9 months. They did not get that rhythmic, repetitive piece that helps us regulate our own heart rate, regulate our own temperature, all of those pieces. So, for example, my little ones that came in this morning, in the clinic waiting room, straight out of their car, this little 2-year-old's heart rate was at 150. I popped him in the swing. We got a sucker, and within 5 minutes, his heart rate was down to 80. He was no longer laying on the floor and driving a car back and forth. We were playing peekaboo and engaging in games, and he was using 3 to 5 word sentences. So mom was willing to put a swing in the house, and she is now using that for her little guy when he starts to fall apart and falls into those behaviors that really look like autism. She pops him in the swing, gets that heart rate and that autonomic nervous system part put back together a little bit, and then they go about their day. Super simple. She does it all throughout the day, but it keeps him from screaming and lets him play appropriately with his siblings and his mom.
And that's great. And so do you, so for example, is that something you do where you say to the mom, look, this has got to be X number of minutes every hour? Is it PRN, or you probably try to get ahead of it, is my guess?
I've been teaching parents a lot about just looking at their kids and physically looking at how they're doing, just watching them throughout the day. Just take this next week, and I want you to look at their pupils. Do their pupils change? Are their pupils bigger or smaller, different parts of the day? I have a couple of parents who've even bought little pulse oxes so that they can put a number to what they're seeing, which has been really fun science to play with a little bit. But for the most part, my take-home homework for parents, because they're coming, by the time they get to me, they are completely stressed out. The parents are falling apart. The kid's a disaster. So I usually do send parents home with just a really specific list of set the timer on your fridge. Every hour, just do this for 7 to 10 minutes. And then set the timer again when you get done and do the same thing. Just with that simple consistency, I think that parents do see changes in the kids, and then they have to think less while they're doing this because they're in such a state of crisis anyways.
Got it. Is there anything that clinicians, right? Because I think a lot of the behaviors that you describe, for example, if they came into my office, they'd meet criteria for ADHD, right? And so then we start giving, right? When we start giving medications. And so, and again, that's sort of what we have in our toolbox. I mean, is there anything we should be recommending straight out as some sort of sensory diet for some of these kids, or should we wait, make a referral to OT and let you guys do that? Again, I'm not saying clearly I'm never going to do what you're doing, but I'm just wondering. There are also some communities that are connected today that may not have easy access to an occupational therapist. So I guess I'm wondering, when it's difficult to access an occupational therapist, what are some things that clinicians might do?
My recommendations are to go back to those rhythmic and repetitive type activities that the kids most likely missed out on. If they can sit in a rocking chair while they do story time, if they can pop in the swing and listen to stories on the book if mom needs a break, if they can get a trampoline or a bounce house for the outside, if they can take the kids swimming a few times a week. A lot of those movement things are going to help put the kids back together, are going to improve their body awareness. Jumping is a great one. We're also safety focused, but just to get a trampoline or get the kid out jumping or going on a walk, just rhythmic repetitive movement is a great place to start with any of these kids. And it's a good family activity to do if it's something that you can enjoy with your kid, pushing them on a swing, and it's the time that they'll talk to you and settle in. That's just good for family team building. So repetitive activities frequently throughout the day and movement tasks that require both sides of your body are really good.
Do you include music in any of this?
I do. With all of this stuff, it's so child specific and it can go either way. And it's really hard to kind of pick out the little pieces of what's helping and what's hurting without really looking at the big picture. Music with rhythm, drumming music, that kind of thing can be really powerful at bringing kids down. We have a couple of different music systems that we use here at the clinic that are music that has been changed to hit different parts of the brain. So that can be very powerful. At the same time, I have kids that really go through the roof because that auditory system is not very well developed because of what their background looks like. So the auditory and then some of the movement on the swings, you have to be a little bit more careful with, I feel like, because you can rev kids up or send kids in the opposite direction pretty easily.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry, I've been kind of monopolizing, but I just wanted to kind of clarify some of the points you'd made. And I know your work, so I just wanted to pull those points out because the beginning was a little bit hard to hear, but I just want to make sure that we covered all the key points that I know that are important to you. Are there other questions from the network right now for Erica? Good, because I got more. So another quick one, Erica. So first of all, like, how many occupational therapists do you have at your clinic, and is this sort of approach something that's picking up that occupational therapists are really starting to look at more to kind of help support treating kids who've been exposed to complex trauma?
I think it's an emerging area of practice. I said at the beginning that we didn't touch on it much as far as schooling went, and I know the program that's here in Billings University of Mary program, it doesn't sound like they're doing anything with this yet. Everyone in my office, I'm making sure, is trauma informed, and I know Tanya over at Billings Clinic is working to be the same way. But as far as OT as a profession, I think it's just getting started, and here in Billings, I think it's probably fairly new too.
Got it. Thanks. And how many occupational therapists do you have at your clinic?
We have 3 occupational therapists and OT assistant and a CODA as well. So there's 5 of us.
Got it. And is it worth it sometimes? I'm just wondering if people who live far away, is it worth having, let's say, an evaluation, and then maybe when they go back to where they live, to have maybe an evaluation and then maybe a sensory diet recommended, even though you won't be able to follow up maybe consistently? I'm just sort of thinking out loud again, how to improve access.
I've seen a couple of kiddos now from Wyoming, I think thanks to you, Dr. Arzubi. And I've got a couple of kids that have come in from up on the High Line and different places like that. And it seems to be a good place to start at least. They've come in for evals. I have done the neurosequential model of therapeutics, that brain mapping assessment as practice even on a few of these kids. And just to get some homework going and get something in place to put in a patchwork and give the parents a different way of looking at the kids, it does seem to have been helpful. And I have parents that are coming in just when they come to Billings to do their shopping once a month or something like that. There is another OT up on the High Line who I'm actually hoping to do a little bit of a training with so that she can work with some of those kids using my reports a little bit more specifically to meet their needs. So I think it's been helpful. The families that I've gotten feedback from that have come from out of state or up on the High Line to do this, it's been worth their time.
Great. Thanks, Erica.
Can I ask a couple questions? Erica, a couple questions from Laura.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Good. Hey, do you have a handout you like? I usually use therapystreetforkids.org, but do you have one that you like?
Specific for trauma?
No, for activities, for sensory diet.
You know, I don't have a handout that I give parents. I actually usually tell parents, this is what I think's going on. Here's a couple of phrases. Hop on Pinterest, hop on somewhere. These are the activities, the types of activities that would be good for your kids. And moms seem to be doing well with that kind of a loose help. Everyone's online. So nope, I don't have a specific handout.
Okay. And then the second question, you know, it's easy to know what to pursue for sensory diet for the crashers.
Right.
So those are easy. But what about the kid that goes into his room and retreats to calm themselves? What do you do with those kids?
Those kids, I've been doing some of the same activities. I've been engaging them in movement tasks near somebody. So taking the social pressure off of it, taking the achievement off of it, like there's no goal for this. We're just going to do this beside each other. And with that rhythmic, repetitive type activity in a relaxing, non-stressful, non-competitive type environment, I have a couple of kids that are that real disassociated, real take themselves away from everybody that I'm able to get more smiling and more engagement with when we've woken their brain up and kind of out of that place where they go to calm and quiet.
Okay. The same rhythmic movement, but not
the same rhythmic movement. Right, not interactive because that ends up being so stressful. Those kids a lot of times seem to be need that little bit of the heavy work too, and the bilateral heavy work just to connect those pieces between right and left for communication and for tolerating all the sensory pieces and for language. All of that seems to help a lot. And the little ones I have in that have been the disassociators lately really seem like they get overwhelmed very quickly by that type of activity too. So I keep it really rhythmic. I have a little guy that comes in and his heart rate will be up at 200 if we do anything that's the least bit unpredictable with his body. So that shuts him down even further because he's sweating and probably feels like he's having a heart attack. So we've had to be real careful with how slowly we've progressed him with movement.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thanks, Erica. We're gonna jump into, if you don't mind hanging out a little bit, we're gonna jump into a case. If you could unshare, and then we'll go ahead and